Hi, everyone. This is Joe Szymanski with Elections Daily. Thank you all for listening today. And today I am here with Nebraska 1st District Democratic nominee and current Nebraska State Senator, Kate Bolz. Kate, thanks for coming on with me today.
Glad to be here.
So we start with this question for everyone. So what inspired you to run for Congress?
Thanks for asking, Joe. I always share with people that I made the decision to run for Congress sitting at home in a church pew. I was at Sunday service back home in Palmyra, and I had been thinking about running for Congress for a while, but I was looking out at my congregation and thinking about the people I'd grown up with and the people I loved in the congregation and how important access to health care is for them and how much they want good jobs for their kids so they can stay close to home. And how important it is to be able to afford prescription drugs, and how many family farms have been in families for generations and deserve our protection. And I just realized that if someone was going to fight for my community and my values, it was going to have to be me. And I'm very glad that we did. We always wanted to talk about the priorities of healthcare and jobs. And now that we are facing coronavirus, those two issues are more important than ever.
Yeah, and so obviously, like you mentioned, the coronavirus is the worst pandemic that any country has faced in nearly a century. So how has COVID-19 affected the way your campaign has worked and how you've campaigned to the people of your district?
You know, coronavirus has changed our tactics, but it hasn't changed our approach or our principles. And what I mean by that is that we've done more phone calls, we've spent more time on text and on Zoom meetings than we expected to. But the underlying principles driving our campaign are the ideas that Nebraskans deserve someone who represents them, who represents their interests, and who cares about serving the people of this state, not partisan politics or special interest groups. And so we've, throughout the pandemic, maintained our commitment to talking to voters, to being present in communities when and how possible, and to keeping the priorities of the people of this district front and center. That has meant more phone calls. It has meant socially distanced tailgates. But it has never wavered from that fundamental principle that we want to represent Nebraskans.
Okay. So you are also currently a state senator in Nebraska's legislature. So what made you decide to run for that in the first place?
It's a great question. I'm a Nebraska farm kid. My background's in social work, and I really expected to spend my career working for kids and families and people with disabilities. And certainly as a citizen legislator, I have done that. But I realized about a decade ago, I was working a job where I was answering legal questions on an intake line. And I answered question after question after question from families who were struggling with our child welfare system. And I realized that if someone was going to represent the values that I cared about, and make the change that I was looking for, it was going to have to be me. So I ran for Nebraska's 29th district in 2012, and I won, and I've done my best to keep that commitment to those principles of serving families and trying to make sure kids have a voice and, making sure that we're making just decisions that keep the interests of the most vulnerable in mind.
Mm-hmm. And kind of another very unique thing about the Nebraska legislature is that it is technically a nonpartisan legislature. So I believe everyone runs on a nonpartisan line. So do you think that has helped you get more done during your time as senator, or is that just kind of a label on the Senate that still gets kind of thrown over and then divided among party lines in the end?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I really believe in the Nebraska unicameral. And I think the whole country could look to Nebraska as a way forward. I think Washington, D.C. is divided, and it's divisive, and it's too driven by special interest groups and partisan politics. And Nebraska's system is not perfect. nor is it exempt from partisan politics. But because we run on a nonpartisan ticket, because people vote for the person, not the party, through the primary and through the general election, because our leadership is decided through a vote of the body, we tend to vote for the person who is best for the job. And because we don't have caucuses and majority leaders and minority leaders, we are better positioned to organize around policy issues and find those areas that, regardless of geographic or political differences, we can come together to affect change that's in the best interest of our respective districts. Certainly by party registration, I've always been a minority member of the legislative body. So every bill that I've passed has required support across party lines. But we have been better able to find those ways forward because of our commitment to maintaining the nonpartisan Nebraska unicameral. And that's really a spirit that I take to Washington, D.C. with me.
Yeah. And so, to kind of follow up with that, too, do you think that your time in the legislature will give you the experience you need to go to Congress and to get to work there right away for the members of your district if you were to win this race?
Oh, I absolutely do. Serving on the Nebraska Appropriations Committee for 8 years has taught me how to discern between wants and needs, has taught me how to balance the budget, has taught me how to make tough decisions, and has taught me how to work across the aisle. So I certainly take those skills to Congress with me. And I've always been a pragmatic legislator. I've always been willing to sit down and roll up my sleeves and find common ground. And it takes practice to be able to both maintain your idealism and your values and find a way forward. So I certainly take that with me to Washington, D.C.
Yeah. So on your website and on your issues page, you mentioned support for a public option for healthcare in this country. Mm-hmm. Why do you think a public option is the way to go and not Medicare for all, like so many others of your party believe is the way to go on healthcare?
It's a great question, and I'm really committed to a public option because I have spent the last year talking to the people of this district, and I think the public option is the best way forward for Nebraskans. We have talked hours and hours with union members who have fought for their particular healthcare benefits as a part of their negotiation package. I've talked to people who work in the healthcare industry who, because of their industry connections, have put together a healthcare package that their employees really value and believe in. And I've talked to people who've purchased their insurance on the private market and like it. Certainly, we've also talked to hundreds and hundreds of people who say it's not affordable, who say you don't get a quality plan, who are frustrated with the cost of prescription drugs. But at the end of the day, I think that continuum of options is the best fit for Nebraskans. Certainly, I don't think anyone should ever go without health insurance. I think that's part of our commitment to allowing people to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that public option is essential. I just believe that multiple options on the table can help meet multiple healthcare needs.
Okay. And then also on your website, you also mentioned getting tough on China, which I feel like is a message that maybe a lot of Republicans feel like they haven't seen from Democrats in the past or currently. But do you think your party needs to take a tougher stance on China and its government so that way at least those moderate Republicans who might be tilting on the Republican Party as it is right now might see another way to go for Democrats in the future?
I do think that we should take a tough stance on China, but I also believe that it has to be a balanced and diplomatic approach. I don't believe in President Trump's punitive approach to China because it has cost Nebraska farmers and ag producers over $1 billion over the last year. So this get tough approach, there are parts that are important. We cannot tolerate human rights violations. We can't tolerate stealing intellectual property. But at the same time, China has a huge global market for us. And Nebraska farmers and ranchers have built up those markets over time. So there are times when we should be tough, and there are times when we should be willing to find common ground. At the end of the day, I think a more diplomatic approach is what's necessary, and we cannot take a tough approach and be blind to the interests of our ag economy. When we get tough, we can't leave the farmers behind.
Okay, and you mentioned that you don't really agree with the president's way on dealing with China, and a lot of that of dealing with China has been through the use of tariffs. So kind of what is your position on the use of tariffs by the executive branch when it comes to trade, especially in connection to China? And how do you think Congress should maybe kind of deal with that use as well if you were to be elected to that seat?
Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, there are reasons to use tariffs. What my argument is, as a representative of Nebraska, is that farmers and ranchers have been asked to sacrifice in the name of making a bigger bargain that has absolutely not materialized. So there are multiple paths forward, but that path forward can't continue to ask farmers and ranchers to sacrifice or believe that there will be ongoing payments that have no guarantee. I know, because of my farm background and my commitment to Nebraska agriculture, Nebraska producers want to be able to sell their products and to make a fair deal. They don't want to have to rely on a government check. So there is a pathway forward, but it will take more diplomacy and less of a punitive approach.
Okay. Okay, and you're running in the 1st District. And the 1st District is a race and an area where I don't think a lot of people would expect to be competitive when we get to November. So why do you think that you, as a candidate, might be moving the opinion on that in this race?
I think anyone who doesn't see how Nebraska's first congressional district can be competitive is simply wrong. We have we have both an urban and rural representation in the district. Nebraskans are independent-minded. We're still rooted in those ideals that inspired the Nebraska unicameral. And I think at the end of the day, Nebraska voters still want the best person for the job. One of my critiques of Washington, D.C. is that it's become so partisan that we've taken a step back from representative democracy. So I think that, a candidate like me, I think my candidacy can be successful because we're rooted in Nebraska values and our policies are in service to Nebraskans. All of that said, there are other indicators as well. The population centers have typically gone more Democratic over the past few years. Nebraska's 1st congressional district voted for Medicaid expansion on the ballot by 9 points. And I think there is a softening of the electorate. In fact, our polling data has shown Biden within 2 points of Trump in this district. So I think the right candidate with the right message and the right heart for the district can win, and I think I'm that candidate.
Yeah, and again, to kind of continue on that, like you mentioned, internal polling has shown this race close. What do you think is the biggest reason behind these numbers? Is it you? Is it the kind of just the way the country is feeling right now? What do you think is the biggest reason behind numbers that show this district being closer than it ever has been before in the modern era?
Mm-hmm. I really, truly believe in representative democracy and serving the people, and that's the way that I've always run my campaign. So I've spent hours and hours knocking on doors and making phone calls in this campaign and then other campaigns to talk face-to-face or person-to-person with voters. And the most common theme is a frustration with Washington, D.C.'s dysfunction. Nebraskans want common ground, and they want common sense, and they want a representative who will represent their interests, whether it's easy or hard, whether it's in line with a partisan point of view or not. And I think that's some of what you're seeing is people are fed up with politics as usual, and they're looking for people who have integrity and want to represent their interests. Beyond that, I do think that healthcare is the number one issue in this race. It is top of mind because of the healthcare needs in this country, and it's top of mind because of coronavirus. And certainly both myself and Joe Biden are healthcare champions, while Congressman Fortenberry has voted against healthcare access at every turn.
Okay. So have you been surprised by the amount of support that you have gotten so far in this campaign?
I have not been surprised by the amount of support that I've gotten in this campaign. I have been honored and grateful. Certainly, this has been a campaign driven by the people of Nebraska. Over 90% of our financial contributions are from Nebraskans and from individual donors. I'm honored by that, and I think it shows the strength of this campaign and how much Nebraskans believe in us and our values.
Okay. And then, Senator Bolz, one final question for you. What is your day one issue if you get elected to Congress?
My day one issue broadly is healthcare. My day one issue more specifically is affordability of prescription drugs. It's an issue I worked on in the Nebraska unicameral related particularly to the affordability of insulin for individuals with diabetes. But I think across ages, across geographic areas, across partisan lines, people are clamoring for someone to advocate for their interests to be able to afford life-saving medications, and I'm eager to get to work on it.
Okay. Well then, everyone, thank you for listening today. Senator Kate Bolz, thank you very, very much for coming on with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is Joe Szymanski with Elections Daily. Thank you to anyone who will listen on this today. And once again, Senator, thank you very much for coming on to speak with me this afternoon.
My pleasure.